IndeeHub is catered specifically to that cinema-centric expectation. We don't have ads. We're streaming the payments to filmmakers. We're paying attention to every second that a user watches it. If we can just unleash the people who are geniuses, we all benefit from that.
Okay, welcome back to the Abundant Minds podcast. Today we've got the pleasure of having Zach Mahoney. Zach is the founder of IndeeHub, which is a lightning-powered streaming platform, and it provides filmmakers with a direct way to monetize their work. It's given rise to a few Bitcoin classics, including Searching for Satoshi, and super excited to talk with Zach more about the importance of storytelling and how we can get these messages out. So thank you for sharing your time with us, Zach. Thanks for hopping on.
Absolutely. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you for having me on.
Well, obligatory starting point. How did you get into Bitcoin, or how did Bitcoin find its way into your life?
Oh, man. The first part of this story is just kind of pedestrian, sort of boring. It really got, interesting for me a couple of years in. To be honest, I was just working. I was doing my thing, and I had a buddy of mine who was in crypto. He was messing around with Ethereum, and he was doing some other stuff. And, he kind of poked me a couple times and it's like, hey man, have you checked out Ethereum? Have you looked this stuff up yet? And I go, no, man, like I haven't, so about three of those. And finally he called me one day and I happened to have nothing to do. And usually I've just like 18 hours on set or whatever, like just completely consumed with whatever I was doing. So I never really had the time. But this one day I happened to be doing absolutely nothing. I was literally sitting at my desk, like doing nothing, which is rare. So he calls me up and kind of gives me the spiel again. And I go, all right. Okay, I got a day. Let me, tell me where to go, what to look at or whatever. And so I think he sent me to CoinMarketCap or whatever. And I was somewhat familiar with the stocks, and the stock market and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, looking at prices, looking at market caps, like not unfamiliar territory. But everything else was just like absolutely nonsense. So I forget where I ended up, something kind of rudimentary and basic that just explained, hey, really what this technology provides is a peer-to-peer counterparty free transfer of whatever the unit is. And it like immediately I was like, oh, wow. Okay. That's a big deal. And pretty much just proceeded to like, my strategy on the whole thing was like, I'm a fucking idiot and I don't know how any of this shit works. So I'm just going to buy everything and just like hope I was like going to the casino, just like, I'll put a quarter in that machine, that machine. That day, I mean, it sparked an obsession, that I would say pretty much persists. What are we at, almost 6 or 7 years later. And so full disclosure, I was shit coining. I wasn't trading, I never considered myself a trader, but I was definitely buying shit and reading up on shit and learning different things. And I had a great time, to be honest. Like I was big into XRP, had Ethereum, had Bitcoin, had BAT, like whatever random stuff was like popular at the time. I came in right at like the block size wars and like right before Bitcoin Cash, like was airdropped to everybody's Bitcoin wallets. And I had no fucking idea what was going on. Like it was absolute madness. I was like, oh, just drop this thing in my account. It's going up. It's going down. I don't know what to do. I couldn't have told you anything about why Bitcoin was more unique than the next thing. But like I said, my superpower is I know I'm stupid. So I started a lot of reading. And I did have familiarity with a little bit of the financial system. Not a lot. I didn't understand the plumbing. I just had run-ins with banks and experiences with banks, things like that. And they were all terrible experiences, of course. So I was like, anything that can fix this sounds great. And then it took a solid 2 years for me to start to understand Bitcoin. I understood it kind of initially through nodes. So I was working on really, really early versions of IndeeHub at the time. And the proof of concept of IndeeHub, we actually started it on Interledger. And it was the first thing that really allowed us to open payment channels between any two parties and do, 50,000 transactions a second for free, basically. It was like basically Lightning before Lightning was as robust and functional as it is now. And so I was like, okay, well, how can I run a node? Like, can we do this on the XRP ledger or whatever? And just like pretty quickly found out like no, you can't. You need, you can. Sorry, that's not totally true. You can. It's just going to require, $100,000 worth of hardware, and you're going to need, crazy upload and crazy download, and basically you're going to need to be like an IT engineer genius, and it's going to cost you 20 grand a month or whatever. It's like, okay, I'm starting to understand the Bitcoin node thing. And I think I went, it's like, okay, well, let me see what's up with the Bitcoin node. And I was like, oh, I can do it for like $100 or whatever. I think that was really my first major aha moment from shitcoining to Bitcoining. And I was never super anti-Bitcoin. I just like was agnostic. It just, usual story. Seemed slow, seemed expensive, seemed like not the final evolution of whatever the tech was. I started getting into like really obscure financial books, that just the hole started. I started slipping further and further down the hole, and ended up, reading like whatever that book is about central banking and from the 1800s to the 1900s, Lords of Finance. Ended up with some Warren Mosler books. He has this book, Soft Currency Economics, where he basically explains kind of the plumbing of the system, which was revelatory for me. Really, really got down the MMT thing. Read Stephanie Kelton's book, a bunch of other books, a bunch of other stuff. Really tried to just understand what was going on with the financial plumbing. So that was kind of one leg. There's like multiple legs to this table, I guess. And the other legs were, I started. There are really three articles that were hugely important. You had the number zero in Bitcoin, Breedlove's, GG's Bitcoin is Time, and John Vallis, Money Messiah. Those three really were kind of the things that just like really drilled me to the table. But my career as an actor, I was in film. I mean, I really had no frame of reference at all for anything engineering related or physics related. And at some point I realized like, I don't understand, time clearly isn't just this concept of like noon or whatever. And so I just did this like basic Google search, like how do physicists conceive of time? And of course it explains the arrow of time and entropy. It's like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. Like news to me at the time, all very mind blowing. And it wasn't really until I started to have a better grasp of entropy that I really started to understand Bitcoin. And then Gigi's article, Bitcoin is Time, I started to understand mining, the process of mining, why that was important, how profound that really is. Even just from a perspective of creating true, like non-replicable entropy or whatever, like to go if you had to go back and reproduce blocks or whatever. So that was all just absolutely mind blowing. So it was physics. It was like understanding the monetary system, basically. Like that can all just be summed up as in money comes from fucking nowhere. Like that was 2 years of research. Physics, entropy. Wow, and then
I think that's the clip. Money comes from fucking nowhere. That's going to be the
poof.
So you weaved in a lot, which I want to dig more into your background, because it sounds like you've been in film prior in different aspects, and that you also had kind of a unique way in that as soon as you were exposed to not just Bitcoin but the crypto space in general, you were already thinking of building what is now IndeeHub. So if you can weave that into a story, which I think you are well practiced at, maybe give us a taste of what that looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of earlier on. That was like pre-Bitcoiner. Again, like there were a couple other blockchains that were really, really proficient at doing, streaming tiny amounts of value very, very quickly. I would say this was probably like late 2017, something like that, where, I once I realized that we could start streaming money in the same way that we stream data, like I pretty much immediately I was like, oh wow, this could solve a lot of the problems I had in front of and behind the camera. So artists, so the creative side of the industry as well as the business side of the industry. The second you can chop those payments up and you remove, the whole filmmaking business right now, if you really like unpack how it works, it all is kind of derived from box office unit sales, which makes sense, and how payments worked and how contracts were negotiated and how money was raised. It can kind of all be traced back to this system that essentially no longer exists. The second you had a fundamental paradigm shift in how value was exchanged, and movies are unique in the sense that you have to watch them linearly. That's the point. It's a very unique media in that sense. Like a podcast, you can kind of skip around. Reading an article, you're just scrolling, doing whatever. But movies really are meant to be linear, and so paying for that and splitting that payment up makes a ton of sense. I mean, it just kind of hit me very quickly, but I was not developing anything at the time. I'm not a developer. And I was just like, okay, well, someone else is for sure going to do this. Like, there's no question this is going to happen. It's too obvious. And then like 2020 hit, and, we'd gone through the ICO craze, and there were a few shit coins out there that have tried to do the movie making thing on blockchain or on crypto, the NFT stuff. But it just seemed pretty clear to me that a lot of those projects really didn't understand what the actual need was here, which is really just let's alter the incentives when you're producing a movie. So for instance, when you're doing unit sales, it's a lot easier to incentivize somebody. I'm Brad Pitt. You don't have a lot of money. I'm going to take 5% or 10% of box office receipts or whatever the contract might be. Netflix and the streaming world absolutely demolished any of that. Completely destroyed it. Basically, the way the deal is now is, hey, here's a shitload of money. Take it or leave it. We're not going to tell you anything about it. There's no incentive. You're not getting anything on the back end. We're not even telling you how many times it's watched. We're not telling you if it's the most popular thing ever. Like, we're literally telling you nothing. Yeah. It just fundamentally changed how the industry had evolved over 100 and some odd years. So if you can take that payment and basically build out a cap table again, which is the best way to incentivize people to do great work, particularly in movies, it's the ultimate team sport. I mean, filmmaking is the ultimate team sport. And if you can get everybody rowing in the same direction and you get a little bit lucky and you get that 10% magic that happens, people can, really, that can make your career, that can make your life. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. I'm rambling, but basically it was like stream money, like we stream data. That's going to have ramifications for the industry significantly. So 2020 comes along. Nobody had really done it in the way that I had envisioned it up to that point. And then I realized probably the Venn diagram was pretty small, like the amount of people that fit into that box. Like, okay, currently unemployed. COVID, I guess there was more people like that. Understood the business of filmmaking, understood Bitcoin or crypto and blockchain to some extent, and were willing to do it. Like that ended up being kind of a small group of people. So anyway, 2020 hits, and I just say, forget it. I'm gonna go ahead and do it, and here we are.
It sounds like your business is a lot like the ethos of Bitcoin itself and many of the businesses that spring up, which is you can disintermediate all of this waste that occurs throughout the process, and people who are not necessarily adding value end up rent seeking a lot of the benefit that comes out of creators' great work. I mean, in the mining space, to highlight another company in the space that we have nothing to do with, this is true just from the sense of energy and how the energy markets work with Sonota essentially taking what would be like a net 30, 60, or 90 payment, where energy companies have to front all of this capital, all of this heavy infrastructure to provide you a service that you pay for long after you've used it, is extremely capital intensive, and they have to pay whether it's loan costs or just amortize the cost of that into their service, creates a lot of waste. And things like Lightning, in this case, for both your service and for Sonota, disintermediating kind of the energy contracts, is it cuts out this time gap and this long string of nodes that you have to get through between the creator and the end user. and that person that's paying for the end product, and compresses that time scale or that gap down to, seconds or minutes. In the case of miners, you use an electron and almost immediately that income is produced. And sounds like similar on your platform is people watch and nearly instantaneously that can be distributed back to the filmmaker or the creator.
Yep. It nailed it. And I look at it like, from an artistic perspective, artists play this really, really important role in society where we're mirroring back what's going on in society. And, ideally we're doing it with some reverence for truth, but there's this direct energetic relationship between society and artists. And the more that signal becomes noise, the more things that are in between there, the worse the relationship gets. Or I should say, like the less clear the relationship gets. And so now it's pretty obvious that we've got, essentially that signal's been hijacked. And it's net negative for society. We need artists to do this game and to do this dance so our consciousness can sort of progress in the right direction. And that signal needs to be as pure as possible. So the way that I looked at it was like, okay, well, how can we have that energetic transfer immediately and get that feedback immediately in the digital realm? And, obviously that's Lightning, that's Bitcoin, that's financial energy, if you want to look at it that way. Like if you look at it, if you've ever done theater, there's just something so magical about that instant energetic feedback that's in the room. I mean, immediately where the audience is at, what's landing, what's working, what you're doing, how they're receiving it. And there's nothing better than that pure, direct, energetic relationship. So obviously we live in the digital age. Movies are digital. We're not going to change that necessarily. So let's try to get as close as we can to having a pure signal and pure relationship with as few things in between it as possible.
So as far as the alternatives, I mean, it's really enlightening to hear what the structure is like on the back end with streaming services. I mean, people basically, if they're creating long form content, they have a couple of options. They can do what you talked about with sort of the big box, go through the studios and go through the traditional pipes that in many ways are getting invalidated. You can go through the big streaming services, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, whatever it may be, and trust me, bro, on how much they're going to pay you.
Yeah.
You can go through things like YouTube or, try to monetize ad revenue on YouTube or Spotify or whatever it may be. What are some of the benefits and drawbacks of going on something like your platform versus trying all these other ways of creating? Because people, I mean, I know as trying to be a musician for a little while, it's tough to get paid for your work nowadays. Even if you make incredible work and reach millions of people, you may get not even close to a living wage.
Yep. Exactly that. I'll give a little bit of paint a little history and then try to answer the question from there. I think that we're kind of in the bottom of the third here as far as the internet's impact on humanity. What has it been really 25 years, 30 years? I mean, where it was really became a prevalent part, something like that. That's nothing. That's barely a generation. Where it's so early. And so I think that Netflix came along and did what seems like it was inevitable. Somebody was going to do it, right? They streamed movies over the internet. Okay, at the time, that's a very big deal, and they fundamentally changed the business with the streaming model. But that's really not that different of a model, right? You've got your kind of classic. You can buy something, you can subscribe to something, you can have ads pay for it. So TVOD, SVOD, AVOD from a filmmaking perspective or media perspective. But so I give this spiel to a lot of people. Basically, if three things happen in any industry of these categories, the industry will probably implode. So you've got, if technology, politics, and economics all converge at the same time with fundamental phase shift type change, that industry is probably going to implode. And so in 2008, that's what happened in Hollywood. So you had the writer's strike, you had the economy collapse, and Canon released the 5D Mark II. So you had that whole trifecta totally imploded the industry, completely changed the business of filmmaking, the direction of money, the direction of talent, everything just got totally reversed. And it took about 15 years for the subscription streaming model that we live in today to take over. I think that this is just a transitionary period. I think that the new that we just went through a writer's strike again. We went through multiple strikes, not just writers. The economy is, COVID, let's call it COVID, was the huge economic change. And now you have this streaming payments capability. So I think that we're on the precipice of this somewhat new this hybrid business model of like it's semi-transactional, but it's also streaming. I mean, it's also subscription based. So I guess all of that's to say, like, we're kind of in uncharted territory. To simply answer the question, ads are a problem because ads censor, right? If you're a filmmaker and you're concerned about telling the truth or having reverence for the truth or speaking truth to power or however you want to say that, ads are not the greatest tool for you because you're probably going to be censored at some point by someone. So just from a pure censorship perspective, thumbs down on that. YouTube is, when all of this changed, right, YouTube came out around the same time, around that 2008 timeframe. So another part of the technology component that made producing things totally different. We had no idea what YouTube was going to do when it had first come out. People were doing like narrative shows early on and trying to figure out what the business model was. No one could have predicted that like Mr. Beast was going to be a thing and it was going to be like these, like we had no idea. We were all thinking storyteller centric, TV centric, episodics, movies, things like that. Come to find out, YouTube isn't like the most appropriate venue for movies. It just doesn't feel right. YouTube kind of has its own brand now, and it's like content creators, like whatever that means, right? Like people who are random videos about stuff that's hard to categorize. We had no idea that was going to happen. So I think from a filmmaking centric point of view, what we need is a platform that caters to the expectations around watching a movie, which is a very particular experience, requires a particular kind of attention, and you prime an audience in a particular way for that. So IndeeHub is catered specifically to that cinema-centric expectation, both on the audience and the filmmaker side. We don't have ads, and we're never going to have ads. Never say never, I guess. But like basically, I never want to do that, particularly for the censorship issue. And we're in this hybrid model now of we're streaming the payments to filmmakers. We're paying attention to every second that a user watches it, and we're making those distributions to that filmmaker in their cap table over Lightning. But we're really, really early on this RSS 2.0 spec that's being built out by guys like Adam Curry and his crew, which will allow filmmakers to distribute their movies over an RSS feed exactly like a podcast. So that opens up this very new model of essentially, like, they call it value for value. I'm not super hyped on that term, but that's kind of what we say now, where if you so choose, people will be able to watch your entire library for free. Let's say it's movies or music videos or whatever, and they'll be able to tip you over Lightning, and that's a non-forced transaction. But the people who are usually really enthusiastic about tipping are willing to overpay significantly. So Adam Curry says you get about 5%. 5% of people who watch something for free are willing to pay for it, but those who are willing to overpay significantly. So all of that's to say, I'm just trying to say like the different business models. The really new model, in my opinion, is this RSS capability for filmmakers. We're years away from that, just from getting to scale, because the Lightning wallets don't work well. They're not easy to use from a regular consumer perspective. But from an actual novel business model perspective, that's the thing that we're really paying attention to, and I think is super unique. For any filmmakers who are out there who are trying to be very forward-looking, this is super early, and you can do that on IndeeHub. You can publish your film over RSS right on our platform. In the intermediate term, the problem that IndeeHub has is that we're a two-sided marketplace. So we're going to have to get, these are basically, it's a network effect, right? YouTube is a network effect. The parties at YouTube, everybody understand where it's at. Everybody understands that. It has the brand recognition and so on and so forth. We need to build that expectation. So that would be the downside of like, hey, I'm going to exclusively launch something on IndeeHub. But we don't ask for exclusivity. So you can kind of do it wherever you want. We just want to make sure that we're paying you the most per second and that it makes the most sense for you to exhibit your work on IndeeHub over anywhere else simply because you're getting paid the most. Now we have to build out our audiences in order to do that. But I'm pretty confident that in this day and age, the independent films, the independent artists who have audiences who can kind of bring them from platform to platform, it will make sense for them to bring them over to us simply because of how our payment structure works.
It sounds like, if this is an appropriate analogy, like Netflix just changed from sending you a DVD in the mail to streaming, and you get the potential to be one of the first people who's on that homepage and have a long-term spot to hang out on what is likely to be the new version of the filmmaking and film distribution model. And it's hard to say that early on in the trend, but if you are early to a trend, I mean, I love and our whole team loves the Star Wars movies. So George Lucas comes to mind, where he had to build his own special effects house to make what nobody had ever made before, to fit the model, to actually deliver what it was he wanted to see on the screen. Nobody else could do that for him. It was very early. It wasn't profitable at first, but over time, that company, that single arm of a single movie grew to become the largest special effects house for every movie in Hollywood for, I don't even know how long, something like 50 years. So is that a fair analogy to what you're currently building and working on, and kind of where you sit in the time frame of it?
Yeah, I think that's fair. You know, one of the things that I really want to happen with this, you know, we all had like, because our generation, we all had that one friend who was like an audiophile. They were like, you know, they're balls deep in CDs, you know, giant binder, constantly at the music store. And they were always the ones to tell us like, hey, listen to this, check the CD out. I'm going to rip you this mix, whatever. And sure enough, like every band they said was going to be the dopest thing ever was like a smash hit 5 years later, right? They had great taste. They were willing to dumpster dive. I'm really hoping to bring that culture and community back to film with IndeeHub so that the people who have fantastic taste can start to point out and recognize the next great storytellers and help bring their career to fruition. And so I think from a time investment perspective, like the sooner you can get on here and demonstrate talent and demonstrate your ability to tell great stories that resonate, the sooner you're going to build an audience that's going to be very loyal to what you're doing. And you're going to be able to, you know, kind of make outsized gains early on. One of the things that we want to do, we're a number of phases away from this, even from just a regulatory perspective, but we want filmmakers to be able to raise capital on IndeeHub down the line. And so when you're seeking, maybe it's just finishing funds, maybe you're looking for investment for your whole production, whatever it might be, we want you to be able to do that on IndeeHub. And so if you have a fan base that's really attentive and has great taste and understands that you could be the next big thing, and they want to give you $250 or $500 for your next project, and they're baked directly onto the cap table, that's a completely different dynamic than what currently exists. You know, I asked the question on a lot of times I talk about this. I ask the question, what's the difference between art and propaganda? It's like, well, I propose that the answer is who's writing the check.
Clip that one.
Bam. So, you know, if we can get the check writing back to the people, you know, back to the unit sale perspective, like the people who are actually buying tickets in the old model were the ones who were encouraging and funding the next artists, the ones that did a great job of reflecting back, right? Like that dynamic is gone with the way things work now. And so I want to be able to bring that dynamic back from an audience member and a filmmaker perspective. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I encourage not just the filmmakers to get on here early to build a reputation and to generate value, but for film fans and cinephiles as well. It's going to be fundamentally necessary to have people who absolutely love movies and have fantastic taste to start to carve out the culture of this platform and to do it early. There's only so many podcasts I can go on and talk about, but we need people who love movies to get this thing kickstarted. So I think that it could be. I mean, as far as like, let's say 50 years, like in relation to Lucasfilm and what was the name of? He had a few spinoffs that came out of that, right? He had THX.
Industrial Light and Magic was
Industrial. Yep.
the effects.
Yeah. So many different things came out of that. Anyway, yeah, I think it could be Netflix went from basically nothing to spending more money than every other studio combined in about 15 years. So I think we've got another 15 or 20 years of kind of tumultuous revamping of the business model. There's certainly going to be other indie hubs that pop out there, but it's a network effect game for sure. So, we just need to make sure that we're the best parties at, basically.
And it's things like this that can totally reinvent the industry, right? It's not like you're not even necessarily going after market share, but totally reinventing a market. And I told the story to my team to illustrate a different point a couple weeks ago, but at one point, Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix for $50 million is the stated figure in the early 2000s. And now 24 years later, we sit and 10 minutes down the road for me is the last Blockbuster in the world.
Are you up there?
That is Bend, Oregon is where this thing is. And that was one of the greatest missed opportunities, but in a larger sense, like Blockbuster was only ever 10 to 12 billion at its largest, and it was the dominant player in video. And Netflix at this point is over 300 billion. That's, a 30x on what the previous largest player ever got to with a totally different model. So you have no idea how reinventing the business model in an industry can change what the impact of that entire industry is on collective consciousness, on capital. It's hard to quantify, and like you said, takes 15 or 20 years to see if you were right or not.
Yep. So when 2008 hit, like I said, the whole industry started kind of getting demolished. And the same thing is happening right now with AI, where everybody's afraid that the new technology is going to demolish, like the industry is going to be destroyed. Like just based on my experience the last time this happened, I promise you that not only is that wrong, but it is going to come back many, many folds stronger. Everybody back then, so a little bit more context back then, this is when reality TV kind of got popular because the producers were like, fine, the writers are on strike. We can now produce, episodic content quite cheaply compared to, shooting on film maybe 5 years prior. And so we're just going to go shoot this like random reality nonsense and see if we can sell ads in front of it. And like this whole genre took off. So everybody was afraid that was going to like demolish the industry, that YouTube or Netflix were going to demolish the industry. And they did for a short period of time. But what happened is when it came roaring back, it had opened up this market so much bigger than anybody had thought reasonably possible. So you absolutely nailed it with this like 30x, let's say Blockbuster to Netflix thing. I think that as AI starts to take over jobs that frankly no human being should have these jobs. Like there are certain jobs that, like, if we're being honest with ourselves, is a waste of human life. Like definitely let's have robots do that. I for one am absolutely not afraid that any of that is going to destroy society. All of these new occupations are going to come out that nobody had any, like the Mr. Beast situation. Like no one could have ever projected that level of capital, that level of fame, that level of money, whatever random stuff he's doing. I think that that's going to happen. I actually think that human beings are going to kind of go in mass into creative industries. And, it's like, let's say we're sitting at the top of Maslow's hierarchy or whatever, like we're going to really start this sort of self-actualization, mirroring artist, society, truth relationship is going to start to go into overdrive. And we're going to sort of launch ourselves into, potentially a totally new level of consciousness, however you want to define that. And I think that becomes possible as we start to be able to, this was the other point. I'm glad this was exactly the other point. So there's like a fixed ratio of geniuses, right? Like somebody has that math somewhere, but like on the planet, then they're pretty evenly dispersed. But because of the system we're in, it seems like a lot of these geniuses are totally trapped in whatever their situation is. So from a George Lucas perspective, talking about that, like if we can just unleash the people who are geniuses and give them the opportunity to go be geniuses in the areas they're geniuses at, we all benefit from that. And I think that the more we can open that up and the more we can start to self-actualize through things like art, music, self-reflection in a less fiat world, I think the better. And I'm just trying to highlight that I totally agree with your point. I think that the amount of money that this industry is going to start to generate and the amount of people that are going to find themselves as creatives, as storytellers, as filmmakers. I mean, just the word content creator, this entire industry, this did not exist 15 years ago. I mean, what are the numbers on? I mean, we're at billions and billions of dollars. So I'm hyper bullish. I just think that the technology is always what changes and channels energy in different ways. And as you know, man, Bitcoin fundamentally changes how all of this energy starts to organize itself. So I'm hyper bullish.
I think you said it, which is, Bitcoin changes how we organize ourselves. It's hard to even conceptualize what the old system looks like until you've got a mirror held up to it that looks totally different. You have something to compare it to. You just kind of, it's like the meme of the fish swimming around and say, how's the water today? And then the other fish says, what's water? is kind of what we live in a financial sense. But it sounds like the hope is to unlock that even further for art as well, is like when the incentives are misaligned in the plumbing of the creative process and who gets to say, what goes out and what gets shown and what doesn't, the more that you disintermediate that, the more that you unlock creators, the better mirror you can hold up to the rest of society. And I'm sure you've experienced this as well. Bitcoin is not known for its marketers and not known for its adeptness at storytelling. And we've, in 15 years, onboarded something like 1% of the world, maybe, depending on who you ask. So there's a lot of hearts and minds still to win. And I think, and you'd probably agree with me, that unlocking the power of film and storytelling is one of the greatest vehicles that we have for that. And you've got a film on your platform, Searching for Satoshi, that's done an effective job of that. There's many others that are coming out that are trying to tell this story in a way that someone walking down the street is going to actually connect with, and they don't need someone like you or me in their ear just like absolutely harassing them to go pay attention to this to get interested naturally.
Yeah, totally agree.
What do you think the next revolution is in terms of the consciousness that we can bring about with the power of film? Do you think that telling the Bitcoin story is the most powerful thing that you can be focusing on, or is the idea to open this up to any kind of storyteller? Where's the most impact?
Fantastic question. I'm pretty strongly in the camp that we need to be telling. My major critique, and I get it, like I'm sitting on the sidelines, and frankly, I wish I wasn't. I wish I was making Bitcoin movies left and right. I'm committed to this platform, but man, have I had the urge to go do some movie making in the Bitcoin space over the last couple of years. My biggest critique of it right now, you don't have a ton of, and I'm trying to say this with not sounding like a complete dickhead, but I have to say it anyway. Like, there's a lot of like sort of amateur storytelling that really focuses on facts, and they're pushing all the facts about Bitcoin but that is not how stories are effectively told, and that's not really the best way to get that information out there. And that information is just going to stay in this little loop of people who are very interested or already interested in dissecting those facts. The way in is through the general storytelling principles. You need very universal themes, things that everyone can relate to. What is it? There's 7 stories. So basically 7 stories you can tell. Everything sort of boils down to these different, archetypal stories. The thing about those is that they're timeless. And so what you have to combine, what the master storytellers do is they figure out whatever an archetypal human story is, and then they beautifully tell it in the context of that artist's time frame. So you have this context, which is always novel and always changing and always new, mixed with these timeless sort of eternal human stories that we all understand at a very, very, very deep level. So we need Bitcoin storytellers to start to, I don't even want to say tell the Bitcoin story. We need to be telling the defining story of our time right now, with Bitcoin as sort of an undercurrent layer. And I don't think that has necessarily even happened yet, because we're so early. If we hit, let's say the next 15 or 20 years is as volatile politically and technologically that we all think it could be, there are going to be some incredible stories that come out of that about our time and our context. And no question that Bitcoin can and will be weaved into those stories. But I don't think that we're even quite there just yet for Bitcoin to be woven into this human story. Like the Bitcoiners now, we all see the potential of it fundamentally changing the course of human trajectory, but I don't think that that's happened yet. Like the spaceship hasn't completely altered course, and therefore a great storyteller hasn't been able to go back and tell that story again and understand what the components of it were and why the spaceship changed course anyway. So to answer your question, this can't be just a Bitcoin movie only platform, but by all means bring all of your Bitcoin movies. I'm not saying don't do that. They're super necessary, and obviously early on it's the perfect fit. Bitcoiners, Lightning, Bitcoin movies. But we really need to, the platform won't be a success unless the platform can support filmmakers and storytellers who are telling human stories, superlative storytellers, and supporting their ability to do that, paying for their life so they can continue to iterate and get better and better and better and better and better. That's really, really what I hope this platform can achieve, because they need the ability to iterate. It's like anything. And you can't make a movie and get better at making movies and telling great stories by yourself. You're not like practicing a monologue to a wall. Films are complex businesses. You have hundreds of people involved. Like we need more iterating more quickly.
And to your point, like telling stories that are aimed just at people who already get Bitcoin is a tiny, tiny subset of the world. And you have to be able to make things that appeal to anybody who can process a story, which is all of us. We all connect much more deeply with stories than with facts or numbers. It's one of the things that I and more technical members of my team are extremely guilty of, is telling numbers, not telling stories. And I appreciate some content. Shout out to Bitcoin Shooter, has done a great job with some of this stuff on the ground, especially with mining content. Is not about a computer whirring with a fan and looking at a pretty picture of a hydropower plant. It's the story of the farmer who now can use electrical equipment because they were able to build out generation. And he was able to have essentially the conveniences of modern times that many of us take for granted that weren't available to him before Bitcoin mining existed in his community. But the story isn't about mining. It's about this guy, and it's about his family, and about what was able to be unlocked for those people. And that's really the opportunity, is not telling people a technical story, not giving people facts that they have to go memorize and, fall asleep in the middle of, but sharing something that they can relate with, that they can see themselves in these people's stories and understand how it connects to them. I think is, to your point, it hasn't been done very effectively apart from a couple of isolated cases, and usually in very short form.
Yep. Yep. I totally agree with that. And I really, I don't even think, I just think we're early. I just think that we're still early. And I know for those of us who have been here longer than a cycle, like it's just like, it's starting to, it feels like a long time, but man, 15 years in the course of human history, like that's like, come on, it's absolutely nothing. So I think that we'll get there. I think there's just an incredible amount of how do I say it? The quality of character, generally speaking, in the Bitcoin space is just second to none, in my opinion. And that comes for any, like you say, Bitcoin shooter. You got the creative side, you've got the business side, you've got the technical side. And if it's this crazy Venn diagram, like the thing that's in the middle is quality of character that everybody shares, that I've experienced. It's phenomenal. So super bullish. Like I said previously, like these stories are going to be told. I hope they're told on IndeeHub. And I think that we're at the very beginning from a storytelling perspective of how Bitcoin is going to change the trajectory of mankind. Like it's totally possible that we, like, I don't know, it's a bad analogy, right? But like the spaceship's like cruising along and we're like about to hit a comet or whatever, and like there's like a few nerds at the bottom, like, oh shit, like I can do something, and everybody else is like derp to derp, and then like we change the trajectory, and then like, the comet goes by and somebody sees it and like, oh, that was a close miss, and no one has any idea how close we really were to disaster except the nerds downstairs. It's possible that happens, like, and that there's this like special bond of the Bitcoiners over the next 50 years to be like, man, we really did. No one appreciates it. No one really cares, but we know what happened and we know how that went. That's possible. It might not be this thing where everybody in the world has this revelation about how fantastic this technology is. And the problem with human beings is we were born a lot and we die a lot, so every new generation has to relearn these kind of fundamental human things. So in 25 or 50 years, a kid's born into the world where Bitcoin is just a fundamental part of the fabric of society. Like, I hope they're out there self-actualizing or whatever it is that we should be doing, like, rather than continuing to talk about Bitcoin. I will talk about it forever because I'm all about this, but
same.
It'll
that's
never
okay. It's okay if it never becomes a huge part of public discourse. If you think about many of the more important revolutions that have happened in history, whether it's the founding of the U.S. or certain very important inventions or discoveries, it's usually one person or a small group of people who are incredibly passionate, extremely dedicated, who devoted their life or a large portion of their life to get together and work on something and make sure that it benefited everybody else who, to your analogy, is just herp derping on the rocket ship, not paying any attention to what's going on around them, for the good of all.
Yep.
And that's okay, as long as the right people see the content, engage with it, network with one another, talk about it, make sure that the evil forces that be don't continue to wrest control of the entire world. And the story ends with the happy end of the hero's journey.
Yep. Bingo. Exactly. I mean, what's the Plato quote? I think it was Plato. I should know this. Basically like storytellers, control the trajectory or control mankind or whatever, something ridiculous, but it's true. Like there's just, there are a few things more fundamental to the human experience than storytelling. And it is of the utmost importance that we give ourselves the opportunity to continue to cultivate high quality, talented stories and storytellers. Right? It's for our own benefit. It's like clean food, clean water, clean air. It's fantastically important that happens. And I think that we're seeing that. I mean, you know, you've got like this Diddy stuff happening right now. It's becoming very apparent that certain forces are controlling the narrative, publicly traded companies that can print money, or maybe the government itself. I mean, the CIA has been involved in the budgets of plenty of movies, are turning art into propaganda. And, you know, it's just like, we have to hold the line there. Like we absolutely have to hold the line. It's of crucial importance. You know, I would say it's really where the battle's being fought right now. Like maybe this is kind of a Jason Lowry perspective, but you know, the kinetic warfare has kind of reached a dead end. You know, we can't just nuke all of each other. And so the battle entered this like Akashic informational realm. Yes. Line's back there too, but it's out of focus. it's by the Bible.
Audio
and
listeners
the
was
dinosaur.
pointing to software of the book.
Phenomenal book. Outrageous dude, in my opinion. Some people don't like him. I don't get it. Anyway, I think that the battle is in the informational realm right now. And so in some sense, like, I haven't thought about it exactly in these terms, but yeah, like this is the new battlefield. You know, let's equip soldiers, righteous soldiers, with what they need to do their jobs. Platforms like IndeeHub and Fountain, Bitcoin enabled things, Geyser, I would suppose. You know, let's do it, man. Let's go. It's important. It really is.
We've always told stories. I mean, long before we could write, we were telling each other stories to remember the important things that needed to be passed from generation to generation. The tools, the mediums, the media, that's all grown and shifted around us. But the importance of telling a good story has not left human consciousness. If anything, it's one of the most important things, to your point, to actually keep that power in the hands of people who seek to use it for good. And perfect segue. One of those tools is IndeeHub. So one, how can people get involved if they are filmmakers to get on board with IndeeHub and get their content out on the platform? And then two, you know, what are you working on right now that's new and interesting in terms of, you know, features, partnerships, or any upcoming films that just really are exciting to you that you have coming on the platform? Let us know what's next for this powerful tool of storytelling, Prometheus.
Fantastic. So yeah, we're on Twitter at IndeeHub. We're on Nostr. Nippo5 is IndeeHub at IndeeHub.studio. I'm on there, Zack at IndeeHub.xyz for Nostr. Reach out to me directly if you're a filmmaker. We'll get you on the platform. We'll get you onboarded. I'll give you demos. I'll show you how it works. Just reach out to us directly at any of those venues and we'll get in contact with you. You can also go to the website, IndeeHub.studio/register. You can register there as a filmmaker or an audience member. And we're very, very early. This is a beta. You know, it is an MVP. So we are super early in that phase. We're constantly iterating and building. We're also in kind of the very early rounds of fundraising. So if you're an investor, if you're a VC, if you're just interested in this project at all, you think it's important, please reach out to me. We are currently raising, I would call it an angel round, I guess. I did the seed. And yeah, I think, we encourage you to get on there. We encourage you to participate, encourage you to share it, like it, talk to people about it. But we are very, very, very early, so please be patient. As far as features go, other filmmakers, there's a few people we're in touch with, right? We've got a couple shorts that are coming on right now for some like very, very quality production companies that we're excited about. It's taking a little time to onboard them. We've got some people from a Project Greenlight that are popping on. So we're making the rounds in the film world and bringing them on there. Features, man, we have a massive list of things we're constantly building. It really just comes down to money and getting our fundraising secured and continuing to develop that. I would say, please don't hesitate to reach out to us or me if you have ideas, if you have suggestions, if you have things that you would like to see on there. Like our lines are open. Hit us up anytime. That's where we're at.
Beautiful. Well, we had a wide-ranging conversation down to the very soul of humanity in the battle for it. But any final thoughts to wrap it up and tie it up with a bow?
I think we touched on a lot, man. That was a lot of fun. I really appreciate that. I don't know. I guess my imparting thoughts are like, stay bullish humanity, stay bullish Bitcoin. Like, this whole thing is up and to the right, man. I certainly understand that it's easy to get fearful and cynical, and in a lot of ways and a lot of reasons it's justified. But like, when you get down to it, man, like, it's up and to the right. And so just join the party. It's way more fun that way. Like, build, have fun, network, be a human, celebrate being a human, do the things that humans do. And, we'll see you in the future.
Quickest way to quell fear like that is to just put yourself to work on the solution.
Well said. Action, right? Like, maybe this is just self-critique, right? Like, but anytime I'm just up in the Akashic realm, the informational realm, I'm up in my head. It's a scary place where there are not rules and weird things happen. If I can bring it back down to the physical realm, get my body moving and just do. We're creatures of action, right? It should be like 20% thinking, 80% action, and then kind of back and forth there. So yeah, well said. Just get out there and do. You'll feel a lot better.
Zach, thank you for sharing your time. Really enjoyed this and love your perspective on all of these different trends. And I think that you're working on the right thing, that getting media out in an effective way that connects with people, that rewards creators, that properly incentivizes them, and aligns the production of it with the highest source of truth that they know and doesn't compromise that for anything is one of the most important things that anybody can work on. So I'm glad to see you doing it, and hope that anybody listening will make sure that Zach's contact info is in the description. You've got the ability to reach out to him, but just want to thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for sharing your time and your message with us.
Absolutely, man. The pleasure's all mine. Thank you very much. This has been a blast. Hope to do it again.
Until next time.
All right.